Welcome, Ted Lundström, to Supply Chain 600 Seconds. Now we're going to talk about sustainability and specifically climate development or climate change from your perspective. You work at Ovako Group, and Ovako is known to be a very aggressive actor within this area, and you work a lot with the sustainability issues. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see that this question has raised dramatically on the agenda of different stakeholders in the past few years, especially the last year, which we are very happy for. We are the biggest recycling company in the Nordics, producing steel with basically 80% less CO2 footprint than the global average. So we are very happy to see this development. And we see that this is development not just from our customers and from, let's say, the authorities. We also see that there's a higher demand from all kinds of stakeholders. It's our owners, it's from our employees. If we want to attract new employees, this is something they ask for and want to see that the company is in the forefront if they want to work for us. So we've been working very actively within this area to track and map our CO2 footprints. And what is demanded from us basically is a lot within the operations when we produce the steel. But as this is so important for us on the strategic agenda, we have a big focus also on outbound logistics and footprint. So that is very high on our agenda, even though it's not necessarily the first thing our stakeholders ask for.
Can you be a bit more specific about how you do this within transportation and logistics? That is your responsibility. What can you do in order to enhance or improve your footprint within those areas?
Absolutely. What we did 3 years ago is to take the conclusion that we received CO2 data from our suppliers. And the conclusion we came up with was it was very difficult to compare the data between different suppliers. So what we said is that we wanted to do this in a more efficient way. So what we have done is to create our own emission tariffs based on input from our suppliers. We introduced this to the TMS system and we calculate it proactively. So basically when we go in to book a transport, we can receive different kind of options and we can also see the calculated emission from that specific option. And by that we can understand basically our emissions on a daily basis, and we can also manage our operations to steer to a more CO2 efficient way of producing the transport. And it's also very efficient when we can communicate this to our customers to show them you have these alternatives, are you willing to accept this and this trade-off in order to reduce your CO2 by this and this and this. So that is what we've done in the past 2 years or 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Is it common within your business to do this? Do you know that? To gather this data and measure it and present it to the customers?
To gather the data, to present it to the customers, I think it's quite common. But I think it's basically done on a yearly basis, sometimes a bit more frequent. What we are doing is that we don't do it reactively, we are doing proactively. So we do it even before we book the transport, we can understand what our footprint will be. And that, from my point of view, we are among the first to do that. So we are not just sitting in and looking in the rear window and mirror and say that this was the outcome of last year. We really try to manage to steer to something better. And that, I think, is really in the forefront when it comes to logistics.
What's the reaction from the customers? Have you had any?
We have not really presented to the customers fully yet, but we're getting very good response from from the customers when we mention it, but we haven't gone into detail yet. But we also receive a very good response from universities, authorities, and all kinds of stakeholders thinking that this is a really good idea. But we just started this fall, so we are trying to learn and see how we can develop this and use it in a good way to actually reach the goals that we have as a society.
Ted, it's clear to me that you work very with a high ambition within the area of sustainability, and also, as you have told us about, within the area of logistics and transportation. If we look to the future, how would you? What are the challenges, and how would you like to proceed and to further improve the work that you do?
I think the first challenge is to really understand the emissions that we are creating and to measure them as close to reality as possible, and not greenwash our figures too much. But this is a real challenge. And the other thing is to understand that if we find this complex today, when we basically are looking on quite a few different kind of fuels that are used within the transport system, we need to understand that in the future, and basically already now, complexity increase. We will see more fuels coming in. We will see electricity. Then we have to look at who produced this electricity. This will differ between different countries. We look on LNG, LPG. We are looking into different kind of diesel fuels with a mix of renewable fuels to different extents, depending on where you source this fuel. So this will be very complex in the future, and therefore we need to start now to measure this, to find a system and to find the right way of doing this, so we can also adapt to this complexity. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to steer and manage our CO2 emissions in the future.
It sounds like, as you say, a very complex challenge. What can technology help you to achieve this and to make it more? I'm thinking about AI and technologies like that in order to handle all this data and the complexity.
Absolutely. I think the connectivity of different kind of vehicles or ships and so on is extremely important in this, so they can create data and send into the system, so we can actually see the true outcome. Of course, this will be challenging for our suppliers to send us this data, but I think it will be mandatory in the future. We see this on the shipping side, that they have to send this kind of data. So we need to make more of this data automatically created and sent into some kind of database where we can extract it and use it. As we do it today, it takes a lot of resources and time.
Thank you, Ted Lundström, Head of Global Logistics at Ovako Group.
Thank you for having me.